Good morning, everyone. My name is Lauren Abner, and I'm the technology consultant at KDLA. My primary job responsibility is acting as the state E-rate coordinator for Kentucky Public Libraries. And we are kicking off our first training for funding year 2022 that goes through a specific form. Today, we're talking about the Form 470 for Category 1. So that would be for requests for internet access and data transmission services, as well as hotspot service for the bookmobile. In a couple of weeks, we'll go over Category 2 requests. If you've downloaded the full page slides from the Blackboard Learn course room, then you'll have this hyperlinked version with the presentation contents where you can click to go to different sections of the slides if you need a refresher on performing a certain action. So I hope that's helpful to you. And again, if you notice any issues with the slides, please feel free to contact me, and I will make some edits. Just a disclaimer, I do my very best job to provide you the most up-to-date and accurate information about E-rate program rules and navigation of the forms, but at the end of the day, I am not the governing body for the program, which is the FCC, and I'm not the daily administrator, which is the Universal Service Administrative Company. So things could change later. Either there could be an update to the portal itself, or there could be a new interpretation of rules. So if there's any kind of conflict, you should go with FCC and or USAC over me, because ultimately my word means nothing. Okay, to get started, let's orient ourselves in regards to the funding year and some important dates. So this is the E-rate funding years chart that you can download from KDLA's website. And right now we're concerned with the funding year in the fourth row in blue where it says funding year 2022. And you can see in another column in blue that the dates that we're concerned about for Category 1 services run from July 1st of 2022 to June 30th of 2023. So for E-rate, at any given time, you're wrapping up invoicing for 1 year, you're actively receiving services for another, and then looking ahead at what you need and going through whatever steps are required in order to request your E-rate discounts. So for funding year 2022, the time period for competitive bidding opens an entire year in advance of the funding year itself. So the revised version of the Form 470 was released on July 1st, 2021. And while the date hasn't yet been set for the last date you can file a Form 470 to open an E-rate competitive bidding process, it will likely be in late February. My guesstimate is February 25th of 2022. However, we won't know that until USAC makes an announcement. And based on the past couple of years, they will probably throw out that announcement right before everybody leaves for the Christmas holiday, which is great. So again, for the services, when we're talking about recurring services such as monthly internet access or the bookmobile hotspot service, those dates for receiving the service and being invoiced, again, run from July 1st of 2022 to June 30th of 2023. However, we do have a longer time period when we're talking about Category 2, which we'll cover in a couple of weeks. There's an early installation period for Category 2 equipment that begins on April 1st of 2022. There's also late installation running until September 30th of 2023. So that is 3 months after the end of the funding year. Right now is a great time to be looking at the information about your library system and the individual profiles for each branch to make edits. So right now we're in a period called the administrative window when profiles are unlocked and you can make a variety of changes. So if you need to update an address or phone number, if the square footage is going to be changing for a branch, if you need to ask the client service bureau to create a new entity for you and link into your library system, this is the time to do so. Also during the administrative window is when your local school district will be uploading information about enrollment in the school system and the percentage of students who qualify for free or reduced lunch, which will play into the discount rate that your library qualifies for. This administrative window will remain open until a day and a half before the filing window for the application form starts. So likely you'll have until around January 10th to continue making these edits. It is possible to make edits later, but you have to go through a little more rigmarole in working with an application reviewer if you want to make updates after the application filing window has begun. So just right now, consider whether or not you're going to have any new branches that will open by the end of the funding year. Or consider if you have a branch that has closed. You don't want to close the entity itself for E-rate purposes until you are absolutely 100% certain that all E-rate invoicing has been completed for that particular entity. And if you have questions, of course, contact me. Now let us talk about the E-rate eligible services list so you know what kind of stuff your library can request a discount on. So to view the E-rate eligible services list, you can go to the USAC website, and they will post the most recent eligible services list as well as lists from previous funding years. At the time this webinar is being recorded, the eligible services list for funding year 2022 is still in its draft version. It's not that unusual at this point. Really, the eligible services list hasn't had any major edits since E-rate modernization went into effect in funding year 2015. So you can look at the draft version that's available through the FCC website, and sometime in the next few weeks, the FCC will finalize that list, and that's generally when we get a better idea of the dates for the application filing window. So for the eligible services list, it's split into two major parts called categories. Category 1 involves getting connectivity to library buildings or to school buildings. Category 2 is about getting that connectivity to the devices inside the building. So if they're wired on the local area network, if it's a device accessing the Wi-Fi, it's about making sure those devices can connect to the connectivity, obviously. Okay. For Category 1, there is now just one service type, Internet Access and Data Transmission Services. Discounts for voice service were completely phased out of the program by funding year 2019. So for Internet Access and Data Transmission Services, basically all of the various ways that you can connect to the Internet are E-rate eligible. So it can be a fiber connection, cable, DSL, satellite, even microwave. So depending on your library situation, you're going to be going through a bidding process to find the most cost-effective solution for what you need. And for some places, they're going to have really inexpensive internet options. Other places, it will be substantially more. That's why there's not a particular budget limit on Category 1 requests, because connectivity isn't equal all around the country, and that's the point of the E-rate discounts. So in addition to your monthly service fees for internet access, you can also get discounts on static IP addresses. Or if you have a charge for something like a cable modem lease, that can also go into Category 1. You can also get leased data lines, so that's a capacity that's dedicated specifically to your library, as well as cellular data service for the bookmobile. I mentioned that separately because that is really an exception in the E-rate program. When you're talking about a fixed library location, such as a branch building, it's very difficult, I would say nearly impossible, to get E-rate discounts for a branch building because it's a fixed location, and most likely the most cost-effective option will be some kind of fiber service or cable service, something along those lines. But obviously for the bookmobile, since it is mobile, cellular data is really about the only option. Otherwise, applicants have to jump through a lot of hoops to prove that cellular data is truly the most cost-effective option for a fixed location. This next option really hasn't been something that Kentucky libraries have needed, but you can request bids for creating your own self-provision network. So if that would be more cost effective than getting service from a third-party provider. That is a possibility with the E-rate program. Of course, with competitive bidding, that's going to be fairly complex. And for a service that is being lit for the first time, if you need to buy the networking equipment such as modulating electronics to make a fiber connection usable, then that would be E-rate eligible as well. And just very quickly, we'll mention Category 2. A lot of libraries don't need Category 2 every year, but I just wanted to briefly touch on this because there are one or two libraries that may also want to, at the same time they're doing their internet bidding, also bid for something like a leased router from their service provider, and that would fall under E-rate Category 2, depending on the way it's billed by the provider. So for Category 2, we have 3 service types. The most requested service type is internal connections. So those are pieces of equipment, licenses for equipment, and also cabling to get that internet connection to the devices in your building. So we will go over the eligible services list for Category 2 more extensively. Note that there are some provisos with particular items in regards to certain ineligible components. And feel free to contact me if you have any questions about how to list those requests on a form, if you want to set up an appointment to talk about Category 2 possibilities. There's also a budget for Category 2, which is different from library system to library system. So again, we will cover all that in a couple of weeks. Also under Category 2, you have 2 other service types: basic maintenance of internal connections, which is repair, upkeep, software upgrades for eligible internal connections devices. And you also have an option for managed internal broadband services, or MIBs. And that would be where you've got a vendor that sets up your equipment, such as the firewall, access points, switches, and they handle the daily monitoring and operation of that equipment. So we haven't had many libraries request a service like that, which is often called managed Wi-Fi. But I know there's some vendors out there who are looking to diversify their offerings. So that's something you want to request bids on, just to see what it might cost. That's certainly something that we can work on. Under miscellaneous, for Category 1 or 2, some taxes and surcharges may be eligible. Generally, your local taxes, Kentucky state tax, would not be eligible, but you may have the federal access recovery charge that's specific to your internet services. So that would be something you can get your discounts on. Also, if you are charged the Universal Service Fund fee, or USF fee, again, on your internet invoices, that would also be eligible for E-rate. You have to be careful if you're billed for both internet and voice services on the same invoice to make sure that the USF charge pertains to the internet section of your invoice only. Also, you can get discounts on renting or leasing equipment as needed, shipping, which might be more of a Category 2 need, training for newly purchased Category 2 equipment, and of course, installation and configuration. I also like to mention for internet access that there is a requirement in the E-rate program rules that USAC doesn't fund any kind of service or equipment that would be considered duplicative. So that means it's used as a backup, redundancy, failover. This is not allowed for the E-rate program. So it has to be services or equipment that are going to be actively used in the funding year. It's not something that you've got just in case something else breaks down or your connection briefly goes down. So in order for a library to get discounts on 2 connections, you have to make sure that they are not serving the same populations at the same time. So there are a number of libraries who have received discounts if they separate their traffic for staff only and for the public only, because those are technically 2 populations, but you can't expect questions during application review. And for your further perusal, I've linked to the second report in an order for the E-rate program, which describes duplicative services more specifically. Again, if you have questions, please contact me. Also, in order to get E-rate discounts for almost anything, your library needs to comply with the Children's Internet Protection Act. We won't go into great detail here. KDLA has an archive training on SIPA that we just re-recorded in late October. So basically, if you're going to get E-rate discounts on anything Category 1, or well, most of Category 1, meaning your internet access, you have to be SIPA compliant. There is an exception if you are requesting discounts only on data transmission services, such as WAN circuits that connect your branch buildings, then you don't have to comply with SIPA. Currently, the only library that applies for E-rate but does not have to comply with SIPA is Lexington Public Library, because they're built separately for the internet service that comes to one location and then the data transmission circuits that connect all of the branches. But otherwise, every other library that files for E-rate, as far as I'm aware, must be SIPA compliant. So now a little overview of competitive bidding before we get into the demonstration portion of today's presentation. So the purpose of the Form 470 is for your library to describe what E-rate eligible services will be needed during the upcoming funding year. So you're going to provide details about exactly which functions you need, any specifics about, say, bandwidth needed, where the services need to be delivered, and then service providers or vendors will have at least 28 calendar days to respond with a bid for those services. And I really have to hit this hard. This is one of the few instances where if you goof this up, you probably won't get your funding unless you can go through another competitive bidding process to fix it. It's incredibly important that you don't make a decision about which service provider you're going to use, and absolutely do not sign any contracts or agreements before you've reached those 28 calendar days. Now, if you would like to accept bids longer, you certainly can. So if you don't set, a hard and fast due date for the bids, then you can continue to accept them. But you may also want to select a later date when bids are due. And if you state a later date in the Form 470 narrative or any accompanying bidding documents, then you must abide by that date as your true allowable contract date. We'll get more into the allowable contract date a little bit later. Also, I want to assure you that by filing a Form 470, your library is not obligated to go through with a procurement, and you're not obligated to file an application to request E-rate discounts or accept that E-rate funding if it's approved. So it certainly happens where a library might start a process and they see the pricing, and for whatever reason they decide they don't want to take that upgrade. They're not going to go for that equipment this year, and that is perfectly fine. And there are libraries that have in the past decided that they may not be able to make a strong enough case for getting E-rate discounts, so they might move forward with the procurement but just not file a form to request E-rate funding. Perfectly fine. So when in the bidding process, it's incredibly important that the process is considered open and fair. This is one of the core tenets of the E-rate program. And if it were discovered that you didn't really have an open and fair competitive bidding process, then your E-rate discounts would be in jeopardy. So open means that you're not giving one vendor secret information that you're not telling other vendors. So you're just letting them all know what is required for a responsive bid, and so that just needs to be out in the open for everyone to see. And then, fair just means that all the bidders are treated the same, and that nobody got advanced knowledge of the project. So just basically, if the public knew everything that you had done as part of your E-rate bidding process, and they couldn't find any issues, that is what you're aiming for. Because you never know for E-rate if you're going to be asked for information during application review or a later audit. So you want everything to be above board. You don't want there to be an opportunity for a vendor to criticize you or ask for some kind of reconsideration because you were really trying to give your vendor buddy a leg up in the process. Also, you may not share information about other vendors' bids. You can't say what amount they've bid for. You can't even tell other vendors who else is bidding. So this is not price matching, which I believe is on the next slide. Yeah, so price is paramount. So, this is not price matching. You are not haggling. It's about making sure that everybody has the same information, and then on that level playing field, who really gave the most cost-effective solution for what your library needed. So when we talk about cost effectiveness, we mean that in the E-rate bid evaluation, the highest point value has to be assigned to the E-rate eligible services. So you can't have another factor in your evaluation that's at the same point value, even if it's just by a little bit. E-rate eligible services are the primary factor. You can consider E-rate ineligible costs as part of your bid evaluation, but those must be at a lower point value, and sometimes that ends up being more relevant for Category 2 bidding. And this doesn't mean that the least expensive solution is going to be the one that wins the evaluation, because you'll certainly want to consider things like the technical specifications. Did they meet the requirements that you laid out? Do you have previous experience with a vendor, or do they have experience providing that service to similarly situated customers? So when you take the other point values into consideration, it may be that a slightly more expensive solution, but that has overall better specifications and the vendor has a better track record, may win the overall evaluation instead. Let's see, hopefully I haven't missed a question. Okay. So we will get more into this in the demonstration portion, but there are some big changes on the funding year 2022 Form 470. So overall, the functions are really the same, but you're getting to them through a different route. So instead of having to know the service type and function right offhand, you have to go through 3 series of statements to select what matches what you're bidding for, and then the form itself will determine, okay, here's the service type and here is the function that you need to bid for. And so we're also kind of going back to being technologically neutral in regards to what you're requesting. We used to have to very specifically specify in a service request, I want fiber, I want non-fiber. So now we're going back to the more general way of saying you just want internet access and transport bundled, which is great, but it is a little bit of a change. I think once you see it once or twice, you'll be able to navigate those series of statements successfully. And of course, we're going to get to that in the walkthrough. We'll also talk about some narrative language that you may need if you really only want bids for fiber or only want bids for non-fiber. So when you're thinking about the service request to put on a Form 470, you want to think ahead to what you might want to list on the application form. Now, there will be some updated examples on KDLA's website. They are not up quite yet. It should be up later this week. and they will be properly labeled as funding year 2022. But in the meantime, just be thinking about making sure that your service request truly encompasses what you might make a contract for and what you might list on the applications when you're requesting discounts. So for example, if you have a service request on your form that specifies that you're asking for bids from 100 megabits per second to 500 megabits per second internet access, you can't request discounts on a connection that would be 1 gigabit per second instead. That's outside of the scope of your request, outside the range. So it's all about thinking ahead to make sure that anything you might end up accepting as a responsive bid and select as the most cost-effective solution is going to be valid to list on the next form, the application for discounts. So this just sort of outlines that information again. If you're thinking ahead to the funding request you're going to make on the Form 471, you need to consider certain service requests on the Form 470 for competitive bidding. So if you're going to ask for discounts on fiber internet or cable or DSL internets, then you have to make sure that you have a bidding process that includes the functions internet access and data transmission service, or rather that's the service type. If you're going to ask for discounts on bookmobile hotspot, you need to make sure that you have bidding for cellular data plans. So, otherwise, when you get to the 471, either the form won't let you enter those requests, or that will just be, eliminated during application review. You also need to make sure that if you're going to list a particular branch as a recipient of service on the Form 471, that's mentioned on the Form 470. You can't just say, okay, I'm requesting bids for, 3 fiber connections, and then you realize, oh wait, I've got that new branch opening, there's a 4th. You won't be able to request E-rate discounts for that 4th location if you didn't mention that in the competitive bidding process. There is an exemption that more and more libraries have been taking advantage of in recent years. There's the business class internet bidding exemption. So this is a fancy way of saying that if you get certain internet that meets these requirements, you can skip the Form 470 for that particular connection. So for the exemption, it needs to be your primary internet connection, and the download speed has to be at least 100 megabits per second. And the upload speed has to be at least 10 megabits per second. And so this needs to provide basic conduit access to the internet at those speeds. And it needs to cost less than $3,600 per year or $300 per month in order for that to meet the exemption. So they need it to be a pretty inexpensive service. And that would include any installation fees if you were charged for that. And also this service and price need to be commercially available, but basically if you've got a monthly invoice for that service, you're being charged for it, it's commercially available. So as long as you're not intending to upgrade to a connection that would cost more than $300 a month, if your current service meets these requirements, then you don't have to list that request for internet on the Form 470. You're just going to jump right to the Form 471. Contracts. Let us discuss a little bit about contracts. So before you're starting your competitive bidding process or considering what you need for funding year 2022, you need to check in contracts for E-rate eligible services. And I hope the audio didn't just skip there. I heard something weird on my end. If you're not hearing me correctly, please type something in the chat. So you need to look at the contracts that you may have signed in a previous E-rate funding year after a competitive bidding process and see whether or not they are going to carry you through the entire funding year. So many libraries will sign a contract for 3 to 5 years. So they go through competitive bidding to get discounts on the first year, and then for years 2 and 3 or 4 and 5, instead of going through a competitive bidding process again, they can just skip to the application and say, hey, that bidding process I had a couple years ago, well, this is just like year 3 of that contract. I'm doing the same thing. So that can kind of save you some time and hassle. But if you look at the contract expiration and it's not going to take you to at least the end of the funding year, which is June 30th of 2023, then you would need to go through a bidding process again in order to get discounts for the entire funding year, potentially for a contract that might just cover a few months of the funding year rather than the whole thing. Or maybe after your contract expires, you're going month to month. In any case, you can't get discounts for a contract that's going to expire for the entire funding year if it's going to end before June 30th. You must go through competitive bidding if you're asking for discounts on a service that is billed month to month or it's under tariff. So if you're not under a specific contract, it just kind of continues month after month, then you need to go through a competitive bidding process, unless of course you meet that bidding exemption. You also would need to go through a bidding process if you're still under contract, but you're considering making an upgrade. If it wasn't already outlined as a possibility to upgrade within the existing contract, you would have to go through a bidding process again. Hopefully your current vendor would win that process, and then you might sign an addendum or an entirely new agreement. So you can't just say, well, I signed a contract for 3 years with my vendor. In year 2, well, actually, that connection isn't fast enough. I need more bandwidth. You can't just do that without a bidding process. And if there's any doubt at all, just go ahead and open a bidding process. It's better to have a process than you don't need than to get to the application stage and realize, oh wait, I really needed this process and now I can't get my discounts. You also may want to consider when you're trying to figure out when to start the bidding process, whether or not the library board needs to sign off on the library entering a particular contract. It varies from library to library. Some places, if you've got budgeted a certain amount for internet, the library director or even the IT coordinator may have the ability to, within that budgeted amount, go through the procurement process and select something and move on. But quite a few libraries would need to have the board sign off to say, okay, we looked at your bidding process, we agree that you selected the correct vendor, go forth and sign that contract. So if you're going to need board approval, make sure that your bidding process is going to be completed at least a week before the board meeting, before the deadline for the application. So I suggest that most Kentucky libraries start their Category 1 bidding by the end of the calendar year. But let's say you wanted the boards to sign off in February. You might look and say, okay, if the board meeting is on February 15th, then really I need to start my bidding around January 1st so that the bidding process is completed. I have time to evaluate those bids and then present them to the library board on the 15th. So you may want to think ahead because you don't want to have to, you ask for forgiveness later if you didn't, go through that process of getting board approval. If you're already under contract that wasn't created through an E-rate competitive bidding process, all is not lost. Just one moment. It is possible to get discounts on an existing contract, but this is not the best way to do E-rate. I really hate when this happens. If you have an existing contract, you would need to go through a bidding process to request bids on the specifications covered in that contract, and the existing contract would have to honestly win the E-rate bid evaluation. You can't obviously set it up in a way that only the existing contract would win. And then after you complete the E-rate bid evaluation, you would memorialize the existing contract with a new contract award date for E-rate purposes. So that would just be you signing to say on such and such date, this contract won the E-rate bid evaluation. And then when you're reporting the details of your contract to USAC on the application, you're not going to be indicating the date which you signed it. You originally signed the contract, because that's before even you started your bidding process. Instead, you're going to report the memorialized E-rate contract award date. And as you can see, this introduces, an element of confusion about what the contract award date is for E-rate purposes. And, just for me, for you, and for your application reviewers, if we can avoid that extra layer of confusion, let's do so. So if you're just getting back into E-rate, we can probably make it happen. But hopefully going forward, you'll always make sure that you've got the proper bidding process in place before you sign any contracts. So you have really only one contract award date to keep in mind. Also, in considering contracts, your library likely has to follow the Model Procurement Code. So the Model Procurement Code has been around since 1978, so over 40 years now. And that's outlined in Kentucky Revised Statutes 45A.345 to .460. So if you are going to enter a contract for over $30,000, you need to go through a sealed bidding process. So you can give notice of that process in a newspaper or an internet post, such as posting competitive bidding documents with the E-rate program. And you have to give notice at least 7 days before the date of the public bid opening. So you have to announce that location and the date and time where those bids will be opened. So in that process, you're going to be selecting the lowest evaluated bid price. So that dovetails quite nicely with E-rate program rules. So you may be starting that process to request sealed bids, and in conjunction file your Form 470 to make sure that you're getting in the required notice period for your sealed bidding process while also meeting the E-rate required 28 calendar days. And then if your library doesn't follow the Model Procurement Code, did not adopt that, then you would still have to go through a sealed bidding process for contracts $30,000 or more. You just have to advertise the bid in a different way. It does have to be in the newspaper of largest circulation in your county between 7 and 21 days before the close of bidding. So there's not that exception to do an internet posting. If you're not doing model procurement, it still has to go in the newspaper. And then when we get through the Form 470 example, I do have a bit of boilerplate for the section where the form asks about state or local procurement requirements, so you can use these if needed. Please note, though, that just putting this information in the section of the form for state or local bidding requirements doesn't cover you. If you have to do a sealed bidding process, you really have to have documents that tell everyone the requirements for submitting the sealed bids, when they're due, when the public bid opening will occur, and at what location. So this by itself doesn't just make it a sealed bidding process, if that makes sense. If you have any uncertainty about this, just contact me. Okay, so I think this is the portion where we will start screen sharing. I do want to note that in my slides, I elected to do an example for internet access, and then examples for data transmission only, and the bookmobile hotspot. But during this live walkthrough, I'm going to instead focus on the more common internet access requests plus the bookmobile. So if you're seeing something slightly different in the slides, it's because for this presentation, I elected to do things a little bit differently. The slides are really there for later reference. So let me get the screen share started. It will take a moment. Okay. So I do want to note that I will be using a training portal that doesn't have exactly the same login that you will see when you're going to the E-rate Productivity Center. But just to show you, in case you haven't been in the portal recently, We've got a slightly different URL, forms.universalservice.org, to go to. You can also access this from the main E-rate program website. And you'll see a very large pop-up box with information about logging into the portal. You'll click on continue, and then you will have a place to enter your username and password. And on the next screen, you will choose to get your one-time verification code via text or via email. And that happens every single time you log into the portal. So that was just to show you. But I'm going to switch over to this training portal, which has a different login page. Doesn't have those same requirements, but otherwise mirrors the normal E-rate Productivity Center. So let me enter in my test account. And then I'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit so you can see things better. So I hope this is clear. So once you've selected the E-rate Productivity Center, when you've logged into the system, you'll go to My Applicant landing page. This is where you'll start most actions. I do want to point out that if you need to make any updates to profiles, you want to scroll down the landing page and go to the section for My Entities. So you can click on the name of a particular branch to update only that branch, or you can click on the library system, if you're making edits. So for example, the Loganville, branch library entity, if I click on the name, it takes me to the summary tab, this branch's profile. So if I realize that, I need to make a change to, say, the mailing address, then I can go up to this button that says Manage Organization, and that will open the fields so that I can make edits if needed. So for example, I've got a different mailing address. Maybe the P.O. box for some reason is changed to P.O. Box 501. So I would just make the edit as needed. And then when I hit the Submit button, it will ask me to nickname the update I made to, can do it. Oh dear, maybe it's not going to let me make this edit. Oh, I have to add the county. Okay. Let's see. Put in other. This is a made-up Kentucky town, so this is kind of difficult. So I'm going to put Round County because that's where I'm from. And now I can submit. That wasn't required back when I first edited this profile, so I might just say updated mailing address. It's just keeping track of all the changes that have occurred. Hit submit, and my change is saved. Okay, so now I want to start a Form 470. I need to get back to the landing page. So in the big blue menu bar at the top, I'm going to click on the Reports tab. And under Reports, you can either click on the USAC logo with the blue boxes, or you can click on the link that says My Applicant Landing Page. It goes to the same place. So when I'm ready to start a new form, I look at this cluster of links toward the upper right. When you click on these links, you are starting a new action. These links aren't for looking up previously filed forms. So when you click on FCC Form 470, it always starts a new form. And if you ever accidentally click on that in error and open a new form that you don't need, make sure that you scroll to the bottom and go ahead and discard form. Otherwise, this new form will be left on your tasks list, and eventually the system will start sending you email messages to be like, hey, do you want to complete this Form 470? And it can be confusing if you've already certified another form. So scrolling back up toward the top, you can see that this tells me that I'm filing the Form 470 for funding year 2022. And then we've got this progress bar that tells us which section of the form that we're in at any given time. So the built entity information is pulled from the library system profile. If any information you see here isn't correct, you have to go back to the library system profile in order to make those edits. So first field is an application nickname, and the nickname is just for you, just so you have an idea of what's on here, especially if you file multiple forms 470 to open different bidding processes. So a lot of libraries will do something like FY for funding year, and this is 2022, but they may also add -23 because E-rate abbreviates by the starting funding year rather than the fiscal year ending. So if you list both the starting year and ending year, that may give you a better idea of what time period is covered. If you just glance at this and look at FY 2022, you might think it's covering a different time period along the state fiscal year, which is not the same. And I'm also going to add a note that this is for, Cat 1 or Category 1, and this will be for, monthly internet and hotspot service. It is possible on a form that you can list both Category 1 and Category 2 requests on the Form 470, so just label as needed. And before you certify the form, you can edit the application nickname. You can also edit the application nickname after the form has been certified. And then you save and continue. Do you want to point out some of the navigation? This next page is just for information about your library system. It's got the number of entities. So in this case, we've got a main branch, our branch library, and then also a bookmobile. And then for recipient of service, you're just going to see the billed entity number for the system itself, because the billed entity number acts on behalf of all of the library branches, when it comes to billing and invoicing. Now along the bottom here, you've got a few buttons. Of course, the back button will let you return to a previous page. Really at any point, you can discard form if you decide you don't need to go through with this. Just keep in mind that if you're in the middle of a particular action, like adding a service request, you may have to cancel the action first before you can get to a page that says discard form. Then over here, we have a devil button that you should not touch. Save and share is just a convoluted way to lose access to your form. What happens is if you save and share, this form will be sent to other users that have EPC or E-rate Productivity Center accounts on behalf of your library system, and you lose control of it. The only way to get it back is for somebody else to save and share it with you. So in general, people lose track of their form, they can't get it back. It's just bad news. Just don't do it. If you're thinking about it, just don't. Instead, we're always going to save and continue. You'll hear me say that a lot. Okay. We're still in basic information, and on this page, you're not going to have consultant information listed if you're the one filing the Form 470. You wouldn't be watching this training, probably if you had a company filing on your behalf. But if you were paying a professional E-rate consultant to file your forms, that information would be listed up here. For everyone else, you absolutely have to answer, well, everybody has to answer this question about the main contact person. It's generally the person filing the form. So you can say yes, and it will automatically toward the right pull up your individual user profile information. If you say no, you can search for other full rights users in the library system. And then save and continue. Then for service requests, you need to specify which categories of service you're going to include on this Form 470. So I know I'm doing Category 1 for internet access, so I'm going to click on that button so it turns blue. It's also perfectly fine to list Category 2 as well on the same form. Save and continue. And then you come to a page that asks you about RFPs. So RFP stands for Request for Proposal, but USAC is using this in a very generic way. And RFP for E-rate purposes is just any additional document that further describes your requests. There are certain functions that require you to use an RFP document, and one of them is the bookmobile hotspot. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes, I do have an RFP for the services requested, and then I can upload. You can click on the upload button, or I can drag and drop the file here. In the course area in Blackboard Learn, one of the available documents is a copy of the bookmobile hotspot template. So if that's something you're going to bid for, we've highlighted some fields where you need to make some updates, so it's specific to your library, but we've tried to do some of the heavy lifting for you. So I'm going to click on upload, and then conveniently it opened on my training folder for this particular presentation. So I'm just going to click on the name of the RFP document and click on open. I do want to point out that for any documents that you upload, you need to make sure they don't have hyphens or parentheses. That kind of special character will cause an error message, and it will say that the system can't accept that. So if you make a mistake in uploading a document, you can just hover your cursor over that document image, and when it changes to an X, you can click on the X and that will remove that. You can also upload additional RFP documents as needed. So it may be several documents related to one procurement, or you might have a document that's just for the bookmobile hotspot, another one for maybe your main building internet, or you might have some category 2 things. Whatever is going to be listed on this form, you need to go ahead at this stage and have all of your documents loaded. Also keep in mind that it is a real pain in the butt to try to get rid of an RFP document if you had to make edit to it after you've added a bunch of service requests. So, just don't even start on doing the Form 470 if you don't have the RFP documents ready, because otherwise it's a time-consuming mess, and I will instruct you just to ditch that form and start over. Let's save and continue. Now this next page can be a little bit confusing for folks. It also pertains to RFP documents. And depending on whether you have category 1 or category 2 services, you may see 2 columns here. So it's asking you to please check the box beside an RFP name if that applies to all of the services that you're going to list under, in this case, category 1. So I am not going to check the box because this particular document only pertains to the bookmobile hotspot. If I were doing category 2, say, a large process for upgrading several pieces of equipment, sometimes it's handy to be able to check that box and say, yep, this goes along with everything category 2, so you don't have to worry about accidentally missing that button on an individual service request, as we'll see coming up. Okay, so that brings us to the service requests category 1 page. You can't tell in this particular 470 because I didn't also select category 2. But this year, one of the nice changes to the form is that if you're asking both for category 1 service requests and category 2 service requests, those categories now have separate pages. It used to be you had this big page and you were having to scroll all around between category 1 and 2, and it kind of got confusing sometimes. So if you're asking for both Cat 1 and 2, you will first go to the page for service request category 1, complete those requests, and then when you go to the next page, you would have service request category 2. So good job, USAC. We really like that edit. So on this page, for service requests, it's usually a multi-step process. You can add a new service request. You need to have a service request that has the correct service type and function you're looking for. And then you have a narrative field where you can add additional information. And in my opinion, if you just add a service request without any narrative, you're going to end up having a lot of questions from vendors, and it's going to make it more difficult to evaluate the bids unless you're also using an RFP document to outline those requests instead. So we're going to do 3 service requests, one for monthly fiber internet for the main branch, one for cable internet, which might be upgraded to fiber for a branch library, and then we'll do the bookmobile hotspot. As we go along, I will add the service request and then paste in the narrative information that pertains to that particular request, so you can kind of get an idea of some of the language to use. There is a section in the slides that talks about some of the information you might need to include in the narrative section. So to get started, I'm going to click on the Add New Service Request button. And this is where you see a big change that we've not, had in previous years. So last year, when you were adding service requests, you would say, okay, here's the service type, and here's the function I'm looking for. You had to specify lease-lit fiber. You had to specify non-fiber. So that has changed. So you're going to have 3 sets of statements where you need to select one statement in each set, and then the system will determine what your service type and the function will be. So you're not having to do as much guesswork. Now that means you're using some more words to describe what you're requesting, and you should probably read each statement in the set to make sure you're selecting the one that makes the most sense with what you're doing. And it is possible to make edits if you make a mistake. So in this first set of statements, I can't think of a single library that wouldn't select the first option. I seek bids for internet access and or data transmission services. If I decided I needed to do something else, I can click on this set of statements again, and I can go back and switch it to another one. But I'm going to stick with my first option. I seek bids for internet access and or data transmission service. So once I've made that selection, the next set of options appear. So almost every library would select the first option again. I seek bids for internet access and data transmission service provided over any combination of transmission medium, e.g. fiber-only networks, fiber/non-fiber hybrid networks, or non-fiber networks such as cable, DSL, copper, satellite, or microwave. So basically, you want internet access bundled with some kind of transporter, data transmission, and it could be any old way that you can connect your building to the internet. So I'll select the first option. You do have options if you're, for some reason, procuring internet service separately or procuring data transmission service separately. There are a few library systems that do have, separately, they have procured data transmission to connect their branches in a wide area network. I can't think of any Kentucky library that would be building their own network. So we're again just going to select that first option. We just want internet and transport bundled. Then in the final set, I have 2 options. So I seek bids for internet access and data transmission services, whether offered by one service provider as a bundle package or offered by one or more service provider as independent services. So if you're asking for internet service to a building, you're going to select this option. As we'll see later in the bookmobile example, you'll use the second option if you're asking for hotspot service. So again, for most libraries, in each set of statements, you're going to select the first statement that starts I seek bids. So again, I seek bids for internet access and data transmission services. And behold, we now have a service type, data transmission and or internet access. And then we have a function. So the system has already selected for me internet access and data transmission service. I know this seems really repetitive. It is, but go with it. So now that the function has been entered, I have additional fields to describe my needs. The quantity field is asking about the number of lines or circuits you're requesting. So if you're requesting a circuit for one building, likely the quantity is 1. If you're getting similar circuits for several locations, you might have quantity 3 circuits, and then the number of entities served would be 3. And in this particular example, though, we're just asking about the service for the main building. So we want quantity 1. Again, the unit is a line or circuit. The number of entities served would be 1 for the main branch building. The capacity is for the bandwidth that you're requesting. So for the minimum capacity, you want to start with the current speed that you have available at that location, just in case you're not able to upgrade. So in this case, in this example, this particular branch has 100 meg internet. So I'm going to scroll down my list to 100 Mbps, or megabits per second. That'll be my minimum. And then on the maximum, the top speed that I'm asking about is 1 gigabit per second, or 1 Gbps. I think at this point, for really any library, unless you're really looking to go beyond gigabit, you should list the max as 1 Gbps. There are now some non-fiber options, such as cable, where the download speed can be as high as 1 gigabit per second, because some of the technology has changed. So, when in doubt, 1 gigabit per second is a good maximum to list. Other libraries, and you know who you are, might be looking for over gigabit speed. Then you have a question on the right-hand side: are you seeking installation, activation, and initial configuration? I think it's always a good idea to say yes in case you were to switch service providers or have some kind of setup fee. It certainly doesn't hurt. Now, if you've uploaded any RFP documents, you have this statement that says, please select the RFPs that are to this service request. Now, the document I uploaded as an RFP is only for the bookmobile hotspot service. So I am not going to check the box here because it's not relevant to this particular request. You then have a slight change in the buttons at the bottom. Generally, you're going to be going for the Save Request button as normal. You do have another button that says Save and Create Another Request. That can save you time if the next request you're doing has all the same options for the I seek bid statements. Because if you use that, all of these selections will be made and cannot be edited. So I think when we do category 2, that could be really useful. But for the most part, if you're doing category 1, it's probably just as well to hit Save Request and then go through those sets of statements again on the next service request. Okay, so now that I have saved that request, you can see that I'm building up a grid on the service request page. So this is my first request, and as I add more, they'll appear here in this grid. You also notice I've got the narrative field. I'm going to paste some things in a moment. I also want to point out that if you ask for bids for internet access or data transmission, you will get a question about installment payment plan. That's asking if you want to amortize special construction charges over a multiple year period. So that might be something to do if you're asking for, say, a self-provision network, or you need a lot of infrastructure that's going to require extensive installation costs. At this point, I can't think of a single Kentucky library that would ever need to say yes to that. So I'm going to go ahead and answer that no. And just that's going to appear there depending on the service request you make. If you follow 470 and the only thing you request is bookmobile hotspot service, you won't see the installment payment plan question. Prior to the presentation, I went ahead and made some notes for myself to keep me on track, and also so you don't have to see me tediously typing a bunch of information. So I've already prepped my narrative for category 1, and I'm going to grab the part that is relevant for this first service request that I added. Okay, so back in the narrative field, I'm just going to go ahead and paste what I prepped. If you want to see more of the narrative field box, you can drag down this lower right-hand corner to make it bigger and easier to see. So with the narrative thus far, I've got a basic statement saying that vendors have to have their spins in order for me to consider their bids. Basically, they need to be participating in E-rate, and some generic bid that doesn't even confirm if the vendor can provide the service at your address is going to be considered spam. It's non-responsive, and you're going to disqualify it. So that's just sort of a general statement that it will include with any category 1 request. And then here's the portion which is more particular to the connection for the main branch building. Because this is a plain text field, I think it's a good idea to put some of the information at the beginning in caps so that it's more obvious that, okay, here's the information about one request, here's the information about another. Otherwise, it might be kind of difficult for a vendor to read. So for this first request, I want a line for fiber internet, at the address for my main branch building. I'm telling the provider I already have 100 megabit per second fiber internet, and I'm asking for bids, for the speed I have, 100 Mbps, up to 1 gigabit per second. I also need 5 static IP addresses, and if there are any taxes or surcharges, I would like to know about them. And I'm looking for the service that will begin at the start of the funding year, which is July 1st, 2022. Since this library is already on fiber, I also want to specify that I only want fiber bids. And if somebody gives me a bid for non-fiber internet, I'm just going to disqualify it. That might be something you want to state this year, since these service requests are no longer specific. If you look at the service request information, the function is just generically internet access and data transmission service. It doesn't say lease lit fiber or something along those lines. So in this instance, it's probably a good idea to be a little more specific about what you want in that narrative field. So that takes care of my first request. So now I'm going to put in another request for the branch library's internet. So I will again click on the blue Add New Service Request button. And then I get to go through the series of statements again. So as we learned last time, if you're doing internet access for a branch building, you're just going to go for that first I seek bid statement each time. So I seek bids for internet access and or data transmission service, basically over any possible medium, fiber or non-fiber. And then, I again seek bids for internet access and data transmission services. Maybe it's bundled by one provider, which is normally what we see for libraries, or maybe you have 2 different providers. But however it's going to happen, you're getting a vendor to do this for you. So I seek bids. So I've got my service type and my function, which again is going to be internet access and data transmission service. And then I've got the same boxes. So again, for the quantity, I'm just talking about a line for my branch library. So I'm going to put the quantity as 1. And then the number of entities served would also be 1 for my Loganville branch library. And the Loganville branch has slower internet. So I'm going to put in something a little bit different. So currently the Loganville branch has 25 meg cable internet. So in that case, for the minimum capacity, I'm going to go down the list to make sure I'm selecting 25 Mbps. Then for the maximum capacity, I will again list 1 Gbps, because it might be that my cable internet provider can get me that faster download speed, even though the upload speed is not going to be nearly as high. And in case I have set up for a new service, I'll just go ahead and say yes on installation activation. I'm going to skip that RFP document because that's not about this request for the Loganville branch. And then I'm going to click on the Save Request button. Okay, so now you can see in our grid that we've got our 2 service requests. If I made a mistake and needed to go back and edit something, I can check the box to the left of the service request, and then these 2 buttons become optional. I can click on Edit Service Request, so I can go back into those details, update the minimum and maximum capacity, the quantity, anything like that. If I totally goofed, I can just click on Remove Service Request, and that will just delete that one service request entirely. You can only select one of the service requests in the grid at a time in order to either choose edit or to choose to remove the service request. Okay, so I've still got my narrative, but now I need to add some information about the Loganville branch. So I'm going to return to my handy dandy document, and I'm going to grab this portion. So let me copy it back into my form, and then I'm going to paste it. So I will again drag down this corner so you can see that my narrative is building. So this time I've asked for quantity 1 for the address for the Loganville branch. I've listed the speed that Loganville currently has. So I'm asking for bids between 25 megabits per second and 1 gigabit. In this case, I'm considering fiber or non-fiber options. And again, 5 static IPs and the estimated taxes and surcharges. So in this particular instance, since the library is on a non-fiber connection currently, meaning cable, I want to keep it open, keep the options open. So, I mean, hopefully I can upgrade to fiber that will be affordable, but if not, I still want to keep the option open for non-fiber, like a cable connection again. So I'm not going to put some disqualification factor here. I'm going to say I'm keeping it open, fiber or non-fiber. All right, so one more service request in our example. So I'm going to scroll back up and again click on the Add New Service Request button. And I will again go through those delightful statements. So this one is going to be slightly different since we're asking for cellular data or hotspot service for the bookmobile. We are again seeking bids for internet access and/or data transmission service, and it is any of those combinations for getting on the internet. So first statement again. This time though, in the third set of statements, I will choose the second option that says I seek bids for data plans or wireless adapters such as air cards for mobile devices for commercial wireless service for a school or library that does not have an existing broadband internal connection. So that's just a fancy way of saying hotspot service, and it's awkwardly stated because they're really trying to warn people, not to request this, for a fixed location without a very good reason. So you'll notice this time when I click on the second option, it again tells me the service type and the function. It's already put cellular data plan / air card service, but you have this extra note in red. So if you're ever selecting an option that is uncommon, they do have a note here to try to help you out in case you've selected the wrong thing. In this case, it's just a note that you really have to demonstrate that some kind of data plan is the most cost-effective option. And of course, bookmobiles are the loophole. We'll end up saying bookmobile, bookmobile, bookmobile during application review, but you don't need to worry about that if you're really requesting this for the bookmobile. So otherwise, the questions are the same. So the quantity, again, I'm going to put 1 for the number of hotspots on the bookmobile and 1 for the entity. This is the bookmobile entity. There are some independent libraries that don't actually have an entity number to separately designate the bookmobile. In this case, they would still put 1 because the bookmobile is part of their main branch. It's really going to go back to years ago how your E-rate data was set up. If you have any questions, of course, contact me. Now, here's the portion that's a little bit tricky when you're coming to cellular data, because they're asking for the capacity in the same way they did for your fixed connections for library buildings. And we're not used to describing cellular speeds in this way. We're used to saying something like 4G, LTE, 5G, and that's referring to the generation of the technology. 5G just means the 5th generation. It's not actually about the speed of the service. So we just have to put in something approximate based on the speed you might have through that connection. Like if you did some kind of speed test, on a computer connected to the hotspot, what is it going to come up with? So because the service can be pretty slow in some areas, most libraries are going to put 5 Mbps as the minimum capacity. And then the maximum capacity kind of varies based on what you think you can get in your area. It's been very common for libraries to put something like 25 Mbps or 50 Mbps. If you really want to keep your options open in case 5G becomes available, right now 5G speeds can be up to 1 gigabit per second, talking about the speed that the data is being transferred, not about the amount of data you're using. So just to be on the safe side, I'm going to go ahead and put 1 gigabit per second. It really doesn't hurt to have a maximum capacity that's too high. You just want to avoid having it be too low. I'll again say yes on installation activation, and this time I'm going to check the box beside the name of this RFP because it does apply to the bookmobile hotspot request. You have to have an RFP for this. If you don't check an RFP document, the system will give you an error message. So I will again save request. We can see that my grid has grown. I've now got my 3 service requests for category 1. And I'm going to go ahead and paste in just a bit of information. Now, the RFP document has a lot more details about what I'm looking for, such as the service area. But I think it's a good idea, if you have a service request, to have a little bit of text in the narrative field, even if there's an RFP. So I'm again going to paste this in. This is basically saying I'm asking for 1 hotspot, but look at the RFP for all the details. We've already answered installment payment plan, and this completes all of my service requests in my narrative, so I can now save and continue. The next page will ask if I have a technical contact, so that would be, say, if I'm the director filing this, but I have an IT person who should receive the technical questions instead, I can say yes. And if you say yes, you have an option to either look for somebody with an E-Rate Productivity Center account, or you can enter the details manually. So if I needed, I could put in, Charlie, my IT guy. If you can see where I filled out a form yesterday, and it's trying to give me suggestions here. I'll put in his phone number and his extension. And then, let's see, Dickensian IT, that is his email address, and I will re-enter it. So it's fine to list somebody who doesn't have an E-Rate Productivity Center account, but be careful, because I know some of you guys use the same vendors over and over. Do not list somebody as a technical contact on this form if they are possibly a vendor who will respond to the Form 470 with a bid. Don't do that, because that would be a competitive bidding violation. And a lot of people will just put no for the technical contact. Everything will go to the general contact on the form, and then if they need to consult with another staff member, they certainly can. But once you've completed this, save and continue. And that brings us to state or local procurement requirements. Now, if you're doing a sealed bidding process, I think you absolutely should have information here. We do have some boilerplate for either scenario. So I'm going to go back to my document I prepped and just grab some of this language to paste in. So I've got examples depending on whether or not your library adopted the model procurement code. So this is just boilerplate. You can paste in this portion here. You don't need to have this portion about for libraries that didn't adopt the model procurement code, but you can paste this in if you need an idea of the text that you can enter. When I'm ready, I will click on Review FCC Form 470, and it will take the system about 30 to 60 seconds to generate the PDF copy. You can see this note here that says when the Form 470 PDF is ready, a task will become available to complete certification. So it will eventually appear here on my tasks list. Now the tasks list is kind of funny. If you haven't navigated to that page or you don't refresh it, sometimes you don't see the number beside the word tasks to indicate that you have something on there. So I'm just going to go ahead and click, and lo and behold, I do actually have my task ready. If you don't see something here, just wait another 20-30 seconds and just refresh the page until it appears. So I'm going to click on this Certify FCC Form 470 link to reopen the form. And it opens on a page with Download Document link. So if I wanted to look at a draft copy of this form, I can click on the link. And this draft copy does not need to be maintained for document retention. This is just a draft. After you certify the form, you can download the certified PDF copy to keep for your records. So this might just be a good way of looking over the form again in a slightly different format to see if something sticks out. You'll notice that there are placeholder sections, even if you left some things blank that weren't relevant to you. That's perfectly normal. So I can easily see let me zoom in a bit. I can usually see my service requests, and then I can read back over my narrative. And one nice thing to do is, if you're not working with me directly on filing your Form 470, this is a great thing to download and email to me. I don't have overview access to see draft Form 470s, so if you want me to review your Form 470, please download the PDF copy, attach it to an email, along with any RFP documents you're using, so I can take a look and make sure that your narrative or your RFP document matches the service requests on your form. I'm going to go ahead and close that. Things look good. I need to check the box to certify that the information in the PDF is correct, and then this blue button will become available. Almost everyone will continue to certification. Send for certification is where you would send this form to other full rights users in the E-Rate Productivity Center on behalf of your library so that someone else can certify it instead. There are a couple libraries where maybe the IT person or a bookkeeper prepares the form and then they send it to the director to be certified. But 95% of you, if not more, will just continue to certification. And it gives me a pop-up where I need to indicate that yes, I want to proceed to the Form 470. On this last page for Certify FCC Form 470, I need to check all of the certifications. There are no tricks here. Basically, I'm eligible for the service, and you're going to follow the 28 calendar day competitive bidding period. You're going to keep the documents for a long time. You're going to follow all the rules for procurement, whether it's federal, state, or local, and that I'm not going to work with criminals. The discounts are really going to go to the eligible library, and that, I'm separately budgeting for other technology needs for my library to make effective use of the connectivity that the E-Rate program is helping to fund. So once I've checked all those certifications, I scroll to the bottom and the certified button is blue. I'll click on that, and then a pop-up comes up that you see with basically every form you file. You're saying yes, you can be prosecuted for making false statements on this form, and you're authorized to represent the entity on the form, meaning your library. So you click yes, and then alarmingly, your form disappears. And I really wish they wouldn't do this because it makes it seem like, what happened? Did the system just eat my form? It drops you back on the tasks list, and you don't see any tasks because you've completed that Form 470. So now you need to go back and get the certified PDF copy. You can return to the landing page by clicking on the USAC logo with the blue boxes. And on the landing page, you're going to scroll to the very bottom section for looking up FCC forms and post-commitment requests. It will already be set to the form type FCC Form 470. You'll need to select the funding year. In this case, we're talking about funding year 2022. And then it will bring up results for any in-process or certified forms on behalf of your library that are in the system for this particular funding year. So you can see that yesterday I was working on some screen caps, so I have an incomplete form that I haven't certified, and then I have the form that I just certified today during this live demo. When I click on the nickname in the lower left-hand corner, it will take me to the record in the system. It will open on the summary tab of this record. I do want to point out in the first section labeled application information, you can see on the left-hand side the allowable contract date. So the system tells me the earliest date when I can evaluate my bids and make an agreement with the winning vendor. I'll receive an automated email from USAC on the allowable contract date to let me know that's arrived. But keep in mind, if you specified in your bidding information that you were keeping a later due date, that's really your allowable contract date. The system will just do a rote calculation, what is 28 days after this form was certified, and for the overwhelming majority of you, that rote calculation will be your actual allowable contract date. But be careful if you have an RFP document or in the narrative, you specified something different. So I want to find the PDF copy. So you can see below the nickname and form number at the top, currently on summary, I want to switch to the generated documents tab. And on generated documents, I'll have a link for original version. And that's the certified PDF copy that I want to keep for my records. And this form is now live in the system for people to view right after you certify the form. Vendors can see it, other applicants can see it if they have E-Rate Productivity Center access. And then tomorrow it will appear in a public database on the main E-Rate program website. So I am going to, let's let my screen share. Let's see. Oh, where did my button go for stopping my screen share? This is terrible.
I think if you go up towards the top, it should appear, or the bottom.
That's weird. I'm not seeing it. Oh, wait. Oh, here we go. Sorry, it was a different tab in my browser. That was quite confusing. Wait. Oh, God, am I still in the presentation? I might have exited the presentation. Crap. Okay.
No, you're still here.
That's weird because, oh, here it is. Oh my goodness, I lost track of everything. And I thought I had been kicked out of my own webinar. I was just so involved in the E-rate. So I apologize. Let me quickly jump back into the presentation. I know we have only a couple minutes left. Oh my goodness, I might have had too much caffeine today. That might actually be my problem. Allow me to select the appropriate slide to jump back into. We'll go toward the end. I have ever so many slides. Thank you very much for your patience today. Okay. So again, about the allowable contract date, we'll just review pretty quickly. So with the allowable contract date, you can see that in the record in the E-rate Productivity Center. And then when you reach the allowable contract date, you'll get an automated email message from USAC to say that your earliest possible allowable contract date has arrived. There'll be an attachment that has information about selecting the winning vendors. And for the bid evaluations, again, make sure you don't make any decisions before the allowable contract date. And if you receive only one bid for a service, you do want to email yourself to kind of memorialize that fact, so it doesn't appear that, oh, you just tossed all the other bids. You are completing some kind of evaluation to say you truly only received one. And again, if you end up, vendors contact you after you file the Form 470, don't give them other information that would give them an advantage over another vendor who might be submitting a bid. And again, use the E-rate eligible cost as the primary factor. And there are some bids that can be considered spam and deemed non-responsive and disqualified. If you're not sure about whether something is truly a responsive bid, feel free to forward it to me so I can take a look as well. Also, you can consider state master contracts as a bid. There's at least one library that buys off the state master contract for internet. But that's the only one that's already been set up for E-rate purposes. But you can look at any general state master contract that would involve an E-rate eligible service and consider that as one of your bids. And then USAC has a sample bid evaluation matrix. So that's just one example. It's not the be-all, end-all, but that would give you a good idea of the factors that you might consider. And they also link to more information. There's also another example from E-rate Central that you can look at. I think it's slightly more complicated, but it does show a good way to track bids as they're received. But you do have to work a little bit more to make updates that make sense for your particular library. Just wanted to put it out there just so you have another option. Remember that document retention for the E-rate program is very long. That is 10 years from the last date of service in the funding year. So when we're talking about funding year 2022, services end on June 30th of 2023. So that means you have to keep all of the forms, the bids, the bid evaluation, the invoices for services, all of that needs to be kept until at least June 30th of 2033. It's a very long document retention compared to other retention schedules for local government. And we don't have the dates yet for the application form, but I estimate that the application window for 2022 will open around January 13th. So make sure that you complete a competitive bidding process if required before you file that form. I'll be providing updated trainings on the Form 471 in January. And of course, I'll put announcements on the listserv when I hear anything about those dates. So very quickly to wrap up, since we're a bit over time, you can find more information about the E-rate program on Katie Lee's website, or the main E-rate program website. You can contact customer service for assistance or contact me first. That would be my preference. Contact me, and then if it's not something I can help you with, then I'll direct you to the Client Service Bureau. Also, there's a pretty good newsletter from E-Rate Central that you may want to subscribe to. For reminders about the E-Rate program, if you're not a library director, you may want to sign up for Kentucky Tech, because I send reminders about program deadlines or announcements about E-Rate trainings to this particular listserv. You can send a message to the address below or just contact me and I'll add you manually. Okay, so thank you very much for your time and attention today. I really appreciate it. I'm going to pop the survey link into the chat. That's helpful for our federal reporting, since we are supported by the Institute of Museum and Library Services. If you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to contact me at lauren.abner@ky.gov or 502-564-1728. I'll hang out for another minute or so, but we'll go ahead and end the recording, and have a delightful rest of the day.